Welcome everybody to the BSG Master YouTube channel, where we discuss everything related to the BSG, the business strategy game. This edition is done in 2024, and we have some new updates to the information based on the most recent um, data regarding options and bugs and everything else. So this video is covering our year 11 strategy for factories and production. This is the most important thing in the game. It's not the prices. It's not, you have to have good products that have a good value in order to sell them in a cost-effective way. So we don't start with the wholesale and internet pricing. We start with where you build your factories. And so the first thing I should mention is I'm doing this presentation under the Copyright Fair Use Act, so that it's for nonprofit educational purposes, and everything I'm doing here is for the benefit of students who are taking business strategy classes where they're forced to take the business strategy game and compete against each other and hopefully do well. It's a very difficult game. That's one reason why I like to tutor students in how to play the game so that they can do better. One of the most important things that I also should mention up front is that you should always study the player's guide. So that's the first thing, is study the player's guide. Don't just read through it and skim through it. You need to treat it as if it's a final exam study guide. That means you should outline it, you should highlight it, you should read it multiple times. If there's anything you don't understand, you should read it again. You should use dictionaries, you should use anything, resources, you should search, you should, if you don't understand the terms, okay? Treat it seriously. Do not consider it as just, oh, I don't understand something, I'm just going to move on, I'll pick it up later. No, you need to really make sure you understand it, because everything in the game is based on it. Okay, and the number one mistake that teams make is not reading it and not studying it. And so don't be surprised if you're in last place because you didn't read the player's guide. So I'm going to highlight the most important elements of it. Okay, so that will give you some big benefit already. Okay, so but these are not magical, mystical things that are hidden secrets. They are right there if you just read it. Okay, so please take it seriously. Okay, so the first thing you should notice, okay, is that the game has high tariffs. So a tariff is a tax on imports that countries do in order to usually redress grievances with what another country is doing. Like they might be selling stuff below their cost in order to compete unfairly, and to put the local manufacturers in the country out of business, so they can come in later and make more money with a monopoly power or something like that. So sometimes countries and get into trade wars where they'll all start imposing tariffs on each other to try to make a more level playing field. Whether that works or not, we don't know. It doesn't always have exactly the intended consequences. Sometimes you might cause things like a Great Depression through a spiraling, escalating series of tariffs that countries do on each other, and you get into a tariff war, which is not good for everybody. But in this game, there are very high tariffs. Now, the tariffs vary between North America, that's at $4 a pair on imports. On Europe, it's $6 a pair. Asia, it's Asia Pacific, it's $8 a pair. And in Latin America, it is $10 a pair. Now, to give you some perspective, the cost of labor per pair in Latin America is only about $4 a pair. So $10 is 2.5 times your labor cost. So you're actually paying the government more than you are paying your employees per pair. That doesn't make a lot of sense. And there's another cost, which is that if you send shoes to a warehouse that's in the same region, it's only $1 a pair. If you send it to any other region, it's $2 a pair. So it's basically an extra dollar to send shoes from a factory to any other region. Okay. Another way to put it is if you just keep the shoes in the same region, it's only $1. So it's cheaper to keep them in the own region for that reason. Okay. Um, and if we look at what everyone starts with in the game, it's everyone starts with factories in North America and Asia only. And there's no factory in EA or LA. But you want to sell shoes around the world. You want to sell shoes in EA or LA. At the beginning of the game, the only way to do that is to send them there from NA or NAP in some combination. And so you will be forced to pay the tariff and the extra shipping cost in year 11 of the game. But after year 11, it's all your fault if you do that because it's optional. Okay. Now, the question is sometimes it might be worth paying the tariff and sometimes it might not because it depends on what level of tariff it is. Okay. And what other costs are involved. So that's why it's not just easy to say, don't pay any tariffs. Okay. Because it might be still cheaper to pay the tariff because you have something else that offsets it that's more important that still saves you money. Okay. But in any case, it's still, there's a very high cost to ship shoes to EA at $7 a pair, and a high cost, even higher cost of $11 per pair in LA. Okay. Now, again, it's $5 to North America, so it is significant, but it's not nearly as high as Latin America. It's basically half the price. Okay, it's less than half the price. The other thing you need to be aware of is that the cost of labor in North America is much higher than Asia or Latin America. Now, again, we don't know that unless you've played the game before in LA, because you don't start with a factory in LA, so you don't have any data to look at. But LA basically is very similar to AP. It's almost like a mirror. So they both have very low labor rates, and and in Asia, the cost per pair is going to be around $4 per pair. Okay, whereas in North America, it's going to be around $8 to $9 a pair, sometimes higher. It depends on, how you escalate the pay rates and other things. Okay, and also what upgrade options you have. Now EA is kind of in between. Okay, so Europe is around $6 a pair, which is still a lot higher than AP or LA. Okay, it's 50% higher. And so that's an issue, and it also does have again a higher tariff than North America at $6 a pair. Okay, so it's really questionable as far as whether or not you should build a factory at EA or not. Okay, there are some situations where it could make sense, but more and more as we're getting data on the game, it looks like it's probably not going to make sense. Um, it really only makes sense when you have a very large game and it stays large. That means that there's at least 12 teams playing, anywhere from 10 to 12. The problem is sometimes games start large and they end up small because various students will drop out of the course and they will not continue to play, and the instructor will remove them from the game. And when they do that, that lowers the total demand that's in the game. Okay, and that means you don't need as big as factories, and that means your costs are higher. So, in order to support large factories, you need a lot of demand because you're going to be producing a lot of shoes. And so that's where you get the economy of scale. So in this game, it's better to have big factories, okay, because there's a lot of fixed costs involved with building these products. And the more shoes you have, the more you can spread those fixed costs across each shoe. So the cost that's less per shoe. Okay. And when it's less per shoe, that means you can make more money per shoe because your costs and your income are not necessarily directly related. Some teams can have the same product quality and they could be spending a lot more for it, And there's other companies that could be having even a higher quality and be spending less for it because, for example, of how they configure their factories and where they've located them and other things. Okay, so but the idea is that basically big plants are good, small plants are bad. So that's why it's a mistake to create, let's say, a small plant in Europe of just, let's say, 1,000, okay, or 2,000, because that's worse. Even though you don't have to pay the tariff, it's still worse because the cost per pair is going to be extremely high because the fixed costs are high and you don't have that many shoes to divide it across. Okay, so it's a huge mistake to build a factory at the minimum size of 1,000. Okay, so at 2,000, at least the fixed cost per pair will be half as much. Okay, but still way too expensive. So any plant less than 3,000 probably isn't worth even creating at that point because you really need it to end up being a much larger plant. Okay, by the end of the game, and so that's the problem is if you only have a small game, let's say there's only 6 teams, okay? The total demand in the game is based on how many teams are playing and how many teams stay in the game. Okay, so your North America plant starts with 5,000 space. That means you can produce uh, uh, up to 5,000 with regular production if you have the equipment. But if you don't have the equipment, you can't do 5,000. Okay, that's five that we're talking in thousands, so it's really 5 million. Okay, but it only has at the start of the game 4,000 of production of new equipment, and that was bought in year 4 of the game. So again, you're taking over a company that's been in operation for 10 years. Okay, so you're not starting at year 11. I mean, at year 1, you're starting at year 11. And therefore, the game has been running in this virtual time, before you take it over. And so, in that virtual time, in year 4, the company bought 4,000 of new equipment in North America, and that's what you have in year 11. It's been running now for about 6 years. Okay, Asia starts out with 6,000 space, but also 4,000 of equipment, but it's refurbished equipment, which is bad equipment. Okay, so the difference between refurbished equipment is that it has a higher reject rate, a lower quality, and it's harder for the employees to use, so it has lower productivity. So you'll need more employees to produce the same number of shoes if you use refurbished. Okay, um, and the thing is that refurbished equipment isn't actually a lot cheaper than new. Uh, it's not like 25% cost or anything like that. It's like 75% of the cost. So it's really a bad idea. If you're going to be producing lots of shoes for the whole game for all 10 years, then you want to be as efficient as possible. And just paying a little bit more upfront for good new equipment will get you a multiplier effect on your savings because you could be producing 5, 6, 7, 8 million shoes, or even more, 10 million shoes in the factory. So making sure that you don't have a lot of rejects can really help save you quite a bit of money. Okay. Also, equipment only lasts for 10 years, and its value is depreciated by 10% a year, which means that you have some issues, okay, about the equipment, okay? And this is described in the player's guide, okay? Um, and basically, all of your equipment in North America that you start with is going to disappear on you in year 15, okay? Because it's going to be fully depreciated out, okay? That means you get nothing for it, no money, if you just let that happen. And in year 16, all of your equipment in Asia Pacific will all disappear on you, and you get nothing for it. So it's kind of inconvenient to be having a factory, and then all the equipment just breaks down all at once because now you have to buy all new equipment there. And it's a little bit inconvenient to do that midway through the game. It's better to just buy new equipment at the beginning of the game and use the old equipment to help buy the new equipment. And that gives you more years to pay off the new equipment you're buying. Okay, so you have instead of only having 5 or 4 years to pay off that equipment and to use it. If you just uh, sell the equipment pretty early in the game, you can get the most of the depreciated value for it, and that will help upgrading. Just kind of like trading in a car. Okay, it's cheaper if you have a good trade-in to roll that value forward into your new car. Okay, rather than having no trade-in and you have to pay the full price. Okay, and also because Asia has refurbished equipment, that's equipment you don't want to run for 4 or 5 years because you're going to be losing a lot of efficiency in that time frame. Okay, so you don't want to have half the game with terrible equipment in your biggest plant that has the lowest labor cost because you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot by doing that. So leaving the equipment as it is for the first 4 or 5 years of the game is a terrible thing. Okay, means you haven't done analysis, you haven't read the player's guide, and it's kind of like a landmine that's built in the game that you'll just be stepping on in your 15 and 16. Okay, when you could have avoided if you simply knew what was happening. Okay, what was described in the player's guide. So the other problem is that again, North America has a very high cost of labor. Okay, but also same with Europe too. So North America starts with 5,000 space. Okay, but only 4 of it is new. Okay, um, and we can go ahead and use that. Let's say for the first year, and in fact, because it has 5,000 space, you're not really utilizing the factory very well. Okay, you might as well buy 1,000 more new equipment. Okay, to get it up to full production. Okay, just for year 11. Okay, um, okay, and then you could sell all the equipment in North America. Okay, in year 12. So that would be 5,000 equipment. 4,000 that already exists, and then the 1,000 you bought new, you'll just get rid of all of it so that you don't have that high cost of labor. But you don't want to do that in year 11, okay? Because you need to that production, okay? You still have quite a bit of demand, okay? That you've established, your company has established in the past. And if you just shut down one of your factories, you're going to have very much less production than what you need, and you'd have to have a much higher price, and that will make you less competitive and other things. So you might actually make more money per shoe, but overall you make less because you're going to basically have like almost half as many shoes to sell. Okay, so you don't want to shut down North America until you're ready to do that. You have enough production elsewhere to make up for it, plus any new demand that you can get, because there's a lot of ways you can increase demand by investing in faster delivery time and more retail um, support. Okay, to attract retailers by doing more advertising, by doing more basically more marketing in general. Okay, and so you can definitely increase your demand, but you need enough production to be able to handle that. Okay, you can also get celebrities and other types of marketing too. So uh, the decisions I suggest at this point would be in year 11 in Asia to sell all 4,000 right away of the refurbished equipment. Okay, and go ahead and buy 6,000 of new equipment. You'll have that for the rest of the game, or at least until such time that you can um, shift over to some production over to Latin America or balance it. But I think you can usually maintain that 6,000 for the whole game if you're not going to be buying a Europe plant and you're shutting down the North American plant. Okay, and then there are different upgrade options to buy. You're only allowed to buy 2 production upgrades. Okay, and at this point, the best ones we're recommending is option B, which cuts your setup cost and production run setup cost in half, and that basically is cutting the cost of doing 500 models in half. So 500 models, it has a fixed cost of $15 million per plant. And so if you buy this upgrade. It's going to cut it down to 7,500, and that will help you quite a bit when you're doing 7,500. When you're doing, let's say, um, uh, 7,500 production, that will bring down your cost to only about $1 a pair. If you don't do this option, if you don't do option B, then we have a smaller plant like 5 or 6,000. The cost per pair is going to be around $3 or more per pair. So it could be like 3 or 4 times higher when you have a small plant. As you get a larger plant, then the option B, will still save you 7,500 or basically $7.5 million. Okay. And then option A cuts the reject rate in half. Now, the cost of rejects is not very high, okay, because the cost of production is going to be pretty low for the shoes. The shoes are only going to cost, $20, $25 a pair. But what you really lose, okay, is the income that you could be making on those shoes instead of throwing them away. So that can be substantial because you might be throwing away a shoe that could earn you $20, $30, $40 a pair. Okay. So if you have, let's say, a large plant, okay, and you have a reject rate of 10%, well, that means that could be 10% of your revenues, okay, that you could be losing, okay, and that can be very, very substantial. So the payoff on option A is very good because of the if you're making good money and you have good margin on your shoes, okay, because it has a multiplier effect based on how many shoes you're producing. So A is very scalable. Also, it's very affordable. It has one of the lowest costs. And so the other upgrades are extremely expensive, and they usually don't pay off for themselves. And also, you're only allowed to do 2, and the B and A upgrades work together very well because the reject rate is directly related to how many models you produce. The more models you produce, the higher the reject rate is. So if you do 500 models, the normal natural reject rate is around 14 or 15%, okay, which is really, really high. Now, you can get that down by spending a lot of money on TQM and on best practices and things like that, but still buying option A will end up saving you quite a bit of money there. Because even after you do the total quality and even after you do the best practices, you might end up with 8% reject rate or 7% reject rate. If cutting that down in half could give you 500,000 shoes to sell in a large factory, that can be that can be 20 million, $30 million in revenues that you'd be missing otherwise. So option A, it's kind of, if you just look at the expense side of things, that's not really has a much greater value. But if you look at the revenue and the profit side of things, option A is really the best value option. Whereas option B, it does have a savings, but it's exactly 7,500 if you're doing 500 models. So the more shoes you produce, you don't really save that much total money. You just save more per pair. Okay. And option C, we don't do that in general because there's lots of ways to do a higher SQ. It basically bumps your SQ by 1, but that's hard to judge how much value it is because you might not even need a high SQ. Um, and so also option D is extremely expensive. It's 10 times more, and it basically cuts your labor cost indirectly. But there are bugs with that we've now discovered. So maybe end up that you spend a lot of money for this upgrade, and you get no value out of it whatsoever due to some bugs that are in the game. And it really does increase your overall costs in hidden ways through depreciation expense and other things. So at this point, we suggest not doing the D upgrade at all. Nor we were using it on to keep North America alive by getting the cost of labor down to a more reasonable number, but it's really not worth the cost at this point. So looks like having a factory in North America and Europe at this point are really not worth it in most situations. I mean, you could still, if you end up accidentally doing this and having a factory and there's not many years in the game, then you can still do well by just fixing what you got and running with it. But you know, there are other ways to make sure you're doing well in this game. So if you make a mistake in one area, it doesn't mean you're going to have to end up with last place or anything like that. You just might be not competing for first place. But you still have a good company that's making good money in lots of different configurations. So, but if you really want to make the most money and have the best chance for first place, and making sure your factories are appropriately sized with the best upgrades will give you a huge advantage over other teams that are trying to do the same thing. Okay, so in LA, um, uh, I'm suggesting that you build in year 11, you build the maximum you can in LA, 5,000 new space. Because again, economy of scale, and also that will probably allow you to shut down the North America plant sooner. Because again, the North America plant has 5,000 space already, okay, and you're going to expand your equipment in it to become 5,000. So shutting that down, you need some way to replace that, as well as handle any new demand that you have. Okay, so that's why expanding um, um, Asia will also be important for some years too. Okay, and but the main benefit of doing LA is that you avoid paying the $10 tariff and the extra $1 shipping. So that's really the main benefit. You also get the secondary benefit is it has one of the lowest labor costs in the game. So why send from a high labor cost zone like North America to Latin America, okay, and pay the tariff? So really, sending from North America to Latin America is not only $11 higher because of the tariff, it's also an extra $4 higher because of the cost of labor. Okay, so it's basically about 16, $17 a pair to produce shoes in North America to send them into LA. Okay, so it's definitely much better to just produce the shoes in LA and keep them there, and then you can transfer any excess to either Europe or North America as the situation warrants. Okay, and then you can add the B upgrade option to for models and to cut the setup cost in year 12. You're not allowed to do the upgrade options until after you have the factory exists. Okay, and so you don't have the factory in year 11, so you can't do any upgrades on it. So you have to first create the factory by buying 5,000 new space in year 11 for LA. Then the second in year 12, you can add option B that will decrease the cost of doing 500 models. You can still do 500 models in year 12. It's going to cost closer to like $3 a pair to do that, but you are saving $11 anyways by not paying the tariff. So it's still offsetting, okay? And then in the following year, in year 13, when the B upgrade kicks in, then that'll go from $3 down to under $2. And then from that point, it will come down even way below $2 as you expand the plant. And then the A upgrade, again, you can do in year 13 in Latin America for, again, the same reasons I mentioned. It's to have more shoes to be able to sell at your nice high margins, hopefully. Okay. And you almost always want to um, fill your space with equipment. Now, it is okay if you have too much production based on something that's happened elsewhere in the game, okay, and your prices are end up being too low because you have too much surplus, you have no other way to get rid of it, okay, then yes, you can cut back equipment to right size your factory, okay, but the whole purpose of adding space is to be able to fill it with equipment so that you can decrease your costs and make more money, okay, so you always want to try filling up your space with equipment and only cutting back when you definitely have too many shoes that you cannot sell in a profitable way in any other method. Okay. Then what you can do is you can gradually start expanding LA because it still will be your smallest plant. Uh, I also suggest on AP in year 12, you should also expand it. I'm sorry, in year 11, you should expand it by 2,000 up to 4,000 if possible, um, so that you get a nice large plant in AP. Again, that's because you're going to be shutting down the North America plant. So you'll end up with a plant of 10,000 in AP and 5,000 in LA. But then you might wonder, well, what should we expand after that? Well, you almost always want to expand your smallest plant first, okay? And so what you should do is gradually expand your LA plant until it gets to the size of the 10,000 in AP. So use that to basically fill any demand as needed. And that's because, again, big plants are better than small plants when it comes to economy of scale. Okay, so you'll save more money by expanding your small plant and reducing the cost per pair there than by just making a bigger plant slightly bigger. Okay, so adding 1,000 to a 5,000 size plant is more cost effective than adding 1,000 to a 10,000 size plant. Okay, because it has a bigger effect on the cost savings. Okay, but of course, expanding the big plant is good too. Okay, but it's just a matter of order of precedence. Okay, then I suggest you produce 500 models in AP and LA, so long as the production run setup cost is about $2 a pair or less. And again, in year 12 and year 13, you could, run a little bit higher cost per pair in LA because you're saving so much money by producing there. But you want to get that plant up to the size where you can get that down under $2 a pair. Okay, so do not buy plant upgrade options C or D. Um, and because you can only purchase two upgrades, B and A work together best because they're both designed to help you when you have a large number of models. So once you get these factories up to capacity and you have the right upgrades, the cost for doing 500 models is less than $1 a pair. Okay, and having a large number of models has a big effect on the overall demand that you can get in the market. And so as long as you get the cost low, then it's really there's really very little disadvantage to doing that. Of course, the cost of styling is based on also the number of models, but as long as you have a big plant, that also reduces the cost of styling. So option D, again, I mentioned is too expensive and has some serious hidden bugs that can negate any benefits of having it. Okay. Option C is unnecessary because the high SQ isn't often needed, and there are other ways to increase it through TQM, through best practices, through a better balance of styling and superior materials. So, so you don't want to waste one of the two that you have on that, because it means you cannot get the A upgrade and you cannot get the B upgrade. And those both have a much better value. Option C is also more expensive to begin with. Okay, and so that has some hidden costs as well, with a higher depreciation cost that accumulates. Okay, so although the freight and tariff is high to ship to North America and Europe, the lower labor costs and economy of scale of big plants in AP and LA outweighs those costs. The highest tariffs are in AP and in Asia and in LA, so having factories there is more important than in NA or EA with their high labor rates. Okay, and I can show you some examples of why this is important. Okay, I'm going to go to some reports of the past so you can see what the some examples of the cost per pair. So here's an example of a game that has a very large plant in Asia and Latin America. Okay, and the production here is a very good quality. It's a 7.0. Okay. Um, there is a slight difference in the two plants in that one has the A upgrade for the exchange rate. I'm sorry, for the reject rate, and one doesn't. So this one doesn't. So here you can see that this has a 2.8% reject rate for Brandon and a 6.1% reject rate in Latin America. Okay, you can see the difference here is going to be about 300,000 shoes just on branded. Okay, And then there's also a difference here in private label. So the total difference could be 400,000 or even more if you have larger plants. Okay, so these were not the maximum size plants possible. So you could save, possibly, uh, you know, uh, 300,000 per plant for 2 plants, or 400,000. This could end up being 1 million shoes you might have to be able to sell. And if your profits are $10, 15, $20 a pair, especially in the internet, that can be 30, $40 million. Okay. So that, again, the A upgrade is important for what you lose in potential revenue, not because of the actual cost savings. The cost savings are, it still is about $6,000. If you look at here, the reject rate is ending up costing about 13 million in rejects, and here it's about 6 million. So you get this direct savings of the lower cost of the rejects. Okay, so that's 6 million. But if you add that into the revenue you're losing, that A upgrade is a very good value. Okay. Um, and so if we look at the total cost per pair here, you can see that the labor cost is again very, very low here, $4.12 and $3.84. Um, and uh, the advantage of having big plants also is that you can use a large amount of styling, and the cost per pair is relatively low. Okay, because here it's spending $33.5 million. Okay, but because it's being divided by such a large number of shoes, the cost per pair is very low. Okay. Now, if this plant were half that size, okay, then this would be $6.50 a pair. So more than the labor cost. So we want to keep that styling cost in a reasonable range of less than probably your materials cost and greater than zero. So something in that $3 range is usually a good idea. Up to maybe $4, a little higher, and not really less than $3 very much. Maybe $2 because there is a great amount of low-hanging fruit of value that you get there. Basically, a little bit of styling goes a very long way in your quality. Okay, so having a zero styling means you're missing out on a great value and you can definitely improve your SQ for a very low cost. So it's even $1 of styling per pair is substantial on your SQ. So whereas the last few dollars, okay, if you go, let's say, up to $7 or $8, that last dollar that you add and you spend in styling has much less effect. That's called diminishing returns. Same with TQM. TQM at the beginning of the game, you should do it $5 because it also has an investment value. So the more you spend on TQM at the beginning of the game, the later on you can spend a lot less, and you'll still get all the benefits of the higher SQ and the lower reject rate. So the TQM at the beginning of the game is what helps you cut your reject rate until you can get that A upgrade in there, and they both work together. So here you can see the production run setup is 7,500. That means they're doing 500 models, and they bought the B upgrade, and therefore they're saving the 50% on there. That's bringing the cost for basically they're doing 500 models for less than $1 a pair, 73 cents a pair. Okay. Now again, the styling cost is higher, but again, it's still a good value relative to the quantity that they're producing here. So yeah, so basically getting a 7-star shoe, 7 quality SQ shoe, okay, at 500 models for only under $21 is a very good value in this game. Okay. Okay. So hopefully that should give you a good idea of what to do for setting up your factories at the beginning of the game. You want to make sure that you don't expand too quickly once the factories are set up um, to the 10,000 in AP and 5,000 in LA. It's based on just how many shoes you have left over after marketing them effectively. Again, the advertising this game starts out very, very low. So you need to make sure you know how to properly distribute the shoes. You don't pay the tariffs, and then or more tariffs than you need to. And then you also need to make sure to set the advertising and in a profitable way. but that's going to be covered on another video at some other point. Okay, and also you should look at trying to gain retail outlets. So read the player's guide about what is required to get more retail outlets, because you're in a race to get more retail outlets. So you start out at about a 1,000 or less, okay? And if you can get those up to 4,000 or more retail outlets, that can have a big effect on your overall demand. Okay, so hopefully this has been useful for you. And as of 2024, this is the latest information, is as of the end of May going into June. And I will update this video if anything changes, okay? So please like and subscribe and give information. I don't make any money on these things, so it's just a matter of, the more you send appreciation, the more other students will benefit from it. And that's really what I'm here for, is I'm trying to have students, do well in the game so they can graduate successfully and not have a bad grade and suffer that disappointment. So thank you for listening, and please check out my other videos as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you.